Welcome to Let's Talk, brought to you by the Hempfield Area School District.
This is Jeff Krakoff. We're talking with Jason Lochner, who is principal at Harold Middle School. Thanks for joining us today.
You're welcome. Nice to be with you.
Lots of talk about plans and discussion and decisions about restructuring the middle school grade by closing Harold Middle School. Let's talk first about what kind of impact does that have on you, good and bad, as a principal?
Well, I think that there's always pros and cons with any decision. I'm kind of thinking a little bit historically. Like, I have a long background with Harold. I've been there 22 of my 27 years as a teacher, assistant principal, and principal. And what I've seen over that time is, there were nearly 650 kids in that building when I was there as a teacher. When I took over as a principal, it was more like around 500. And realistically, we're about 370 now.
Right.
As a principal, while a small school is nice from some perspectives, one of the biggest challenges that it presents, and I don't think a lot of people know or understand it, it actually really creates some hard situations when you're trying to balance out class sizes, because as you lose students, you tend to lose staff too. And we do level some of our classes based on ability level. And so what happens is you create some kind of wonky imbalances with some classes being significantly larger than others and some smaller. And so that has actually become a great challenge over time. I would say a pro, though, to moving to a consolidated approach with two schools is generally, as you have more students, you have more staff, and you actually do have a great ability to balance things out a lot nicer for students and staff in terms of class sizes. So I kind of think that's the pro and the con in that situation.
Okay, so by moving teachers and students, fewer buildings, it becomes a little bit easier. You talked about class size, being unbalanced. What are we talking? Are some classes twice as large as others currently, and that could be evened out by consolidating?
I don't know that twice is an actual number, but I'll use math, for instance, as a pretty good example. I think I can speak to. Some classes I might be running classes of 18 kids, and others you might have 32.
Okay.
And what happens is it's kind of complicated behind the scenes, but what you find is when you level any class based on ability, you have a finite number of kids that can be on a team, and you can only offer certain numbers of sections. And so you do get discrepancies like that in terms of quantity of kids in classes. And it's not a simple task of just eliminating that. Consolidation, you've got, if you've increased your staff and students by 50% in a building, you can do a much better job of leveling that out. Overall, your class sizes, you'll have really the same number of kids. You just balance them out much nicer.
Got it. I'm also aware that having 3 middle schools, some teachers and other resources are shared among the schools, and not all course offerings are available currently at all 3 schools. Will that change by going to 2 buildings?
Yeah, so that is true, and that is my understanding. For instance, at Harold right now, I offer for my 8th graders who choose electives, they can have the opportunity to take an extra computer class where they basically learn to code, build, and fly drones.
Yeah.
I share that teacher with Wendover Middle School. They currently cannot offer that because there's not enough time in that teacher's schedule to do so. However, at Wendover, we and I share a family consumer science teacher with them. They have the opportunity for their 8th graders to get an extra family consumer science class, which could offer, cooking or sewing or whatever it would be.
Right.
And I can't offer that at Harold. So my understanding is the plan is to make sure then that really that sharing of staff doesn't occur, so that kids get the same opportunities regardless of where they are.
Okay. So, we talked through your perspective as a principal. What about if you're looking through the lens of teachers? If this change happens, how will their days and performance be affected?
Like myself, there are teachers that are going to be sad. I'm sure that some have been at that school longer than I have. However, With more teachers in a grade level, or basically we'd be adding teams to the other buildings, you do really increase opportunities for them to collaborate with people of like subject and grade. And so professional development for them has an opportunity to greatly increase. For instance, if I were a sixth grade math teacher, currently I have one person that I can collaborate with. Now, in a consolidate, I'll have at least two. So you increase your opportunity to work with brain power and have more people doing what you're doing. So you have shared like experiences.
Okay. How about through the lens of students, probably the most important audience for a change like this, just changing classes as you go from elementary to middle to high school can always be a little bit stressful, but have you had conversations with students, and what are you hearing?
I have had lots of conversations with kids. I try not to ask them leading questions. I'm just kind of curious to see.
Yeah.
And honestly, responses are varied. Some kids are really excited. For instance, I've got some situations where kids, in the way neighborhoods are currently split up, their best friend lives across the street from them, and yet they go to two completely different middle schools. And they are assuming that in a consolidated situation, they're going to be with more like their neighborhoods. So in some cases, they're going to be with their friends. Right now, Harold splits. Maxwell Elementary is one, for instance. I get about 40% of the kids. If those kids are all together, then they, in theory, grow up and stay together longer. I'm certain that there will be situations where kids that they're with friends now and their friends may not be with them in the future. And I understand why that is hard. I guess a pro, though, if I'm looking at it from a student and I'm associating with kids of my like age and experience, is if there's 125 sixth graders now in a building, that might become 180 or 200 or whatever the number is. So in some ways, they have the opportunity to have more friends with them of the similar grade. And then I'm really, it's a different generation, I guess, than when I grew up. So many of these kids know each other from outside experiences and social media, and they can communicate like that. I've not heard a ton of negative. In fact, some kids are really super positive about the transition. So again, I'm sure it's individualized.
Okay. And I'm sure you're hearing from parents, right? So anytime you make pretty much any decision in life, there are pros, there are cons. I think we started off with that. So if there is a closure and a moving from Harold to other schools, just your closing thoughts, what are you hearing, and what would you like to say to parents about the pros and cons?
I think you've got to acknowledge the fact that it's a great little school, and there are wonderful staff there, and we have a great little community. And it's a challenge to lose that. I think about the big picture things and what I know about the other buildings, and I think that the having to be able to have all kids have the same opportunities, for instance, in their specials, is tremendous. The building itself at Harold is very old, and old doesn't mean bad in any way, shape, or form, but I have the physical classrooms that vary tremendously. Some classes are half of the size of the others, and it's just some places are antiquated. The one thing that strikes me the most is the technology. While we have a lot of the similar technologies in the other buildings, just the physical, how you're able to operate them. The building was not built in a time when, electricity was the most modern technology they had. And so it's just not set up the same. I think that, at least from the student perspective, if you can get past the other barriers, I think the physical classrooms environment they're much nicer. And I think that, I think it's just more conducive to all of the teaming things and the technology that we so greatly emphasize here.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your thoughts and time. That was Jason Lochner, principal at Harold Middle School. Thanks again.
You're welcome.